there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Hey, welcome to Half the Battle. Today we'll be taking a look at the mass device. Yay! Part 1. Hey, come on now, it's a 5-part miniseries. There's no way I'm tackling all of that at once.
So today we'll be focusing on Part 1, also known as the Cobra Strikes.
And the review is also gonna be a bit different.
Sure, I'll do the recap, but I'm also gonna point out how different this episode is from the rest of the series and how it compares to the toy line. Now, while the Cobra Strikes is the first ever cartoon episode of G.I. Joe, it wasn't the first animation done. No, that honor goes to the commercial for the first issue of the G.I. Joe comic in 1982. This was done as sort of a loophole since they couldn't make a cartoon series that was essentially a 22-minute toy commercial. By 1983, however, the rules regarding what you could and couldn't show on children's television were severely loosened. So, a G.I. Joe cartoon series could happen. And they started with a 5-part miniseries, The Mass Device,
which we'll be looking at now.
The Cobra Strikes first aired in September of 1983 and serves as an introduction to our main characters. We start off with the Joes taking possession of a fleet of brand new Sky Strikers.
Now with Cobra slithering around on the loose, we need all the help we can get.
Okay, so both the G.I. Joe team and Cobra have been established already. That's fine, both the toy line and the comic had been going for almost 2 years at this point, so kids would have been familiar with the material.
And there is such a thing as telling an origin story too many times.
That's how you get Batman's parents dying in every other DC film. Anyway, one of the pilots almost takes Duke's head off.
I'm gonna kick the mustard out of that crazy hot dog.
Okay, mustard and hot dogs are very fun euphemisms if you want to swear in a cartoon for kids where you can't actually swear.
Duke changes his tune when the pilot turns out to be somebody he wants to bang, namely Scarlet. Before Human Resources has to get involved, they are interrupted as Cobra attacks in generic jet fighters.
Yeah, remember, this was 1983.
And the Rattler wouldn't come out until 1984. And even though Hasbro probably already had the plane in its planning stage, there were no toy models to show the animators yet, so ugly gray jets it is. They destroy quite a few Sky Strikers, but miss the Joes.
Why didn't you just yell, look out?
Didn't you read my green sheet? Man of action.
Now there's an Easter egg I can really dig.
As Man of Action was the name of a 1970s G.I. Joe figure. Some Sky Strikers managed to take off and, this happens.
That's gotta be the dumbest maneuver I've ever seen.
There's no need to fly so close to the ground for that attack. Also, nobody jumped out of those planes, nor is there a parachute to be seen.
Yeah, those pilots are hella dead.
Okay, so it's well known that nobody ever dies in the G.I. Joe cartoon, it's sort of a running gag, but this was the very first episode, so they hadn't quite figured out how to portray this yet. In later episodes, you'd have pilots eject the safety, but here, since you don't see them dying, who gives a crap? Anyway, the Joes make short work of the attackers, so we get our first ever Cobra retreating action, ordered by Major Blood no less, not Cobra Commander, who wasn't even there.
Now there's a fun G.I. Joe trivia question for you. Which Cobra was the first to retreat in the cartoon series?
Speaking of Cobra, we head to their headquarters, which reminds me of the Temple of Doom, though that movie came out a year later. Now, I'm not saying George Lucas stole ideas from G.I. Joe, Cobras are a thing in India, I'm just saying it's a nice coincidence. Destro arrives with important supplies.
Identification, please.
Okay, he's clearly wearing gloves. How the hell did that thing identify him?
You were expected days, Sacco Destro.
Hey, did you notice anything?
Cobra Commander's voice is quite a bit deeper than in later episodes. He'd become closer to Starscream as the series went on. I guess Chris Latta, the voice actor, hadn't quite found the right tone yet.
I designed the Cobra Temple to guarantee us secrecy.
Secrecy? It's a giant temple covered in Cobra statues.
Oh yeah, a real master of subtlety, aren't you, Commander?
Destro has brought him, crystal meth, liquid ecstasy, and cocaine, I guess. Elements that will fuel the mass device.
And what is the mass device?
Well, I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but it's essentially the transporter from Star Trek. If the thing was the size of a Taco Bell and required the rarest elements in the universe to power it. Meanwhile, Duke has been summoned to a military base.
General Flag. Form BX-257, requisition order M.
Hey, I know that guy!
Duke's there because General Flag wants the Joes to test the facility's security by trying to break into the base.
Okay, quick side note.
This character is called General Flag, but he's not the General Flag from the comics or the toy line. They just borrowed the name from the comic. Anyway, Duke anticipated his request because he's psychic, I guess, and had Snake Eyes, Scarlet, and Stalker on standby to try and sneak in. Snake Eyes hitches a ride, Scarlet flies in, all very stealthy.
While Stalker takes a more, Leroy Jenkins approach.
Looks like your team blew it on the first try.
Also, Duke, I think they're all dead judging from that explosion. But of course they make it in, though this doesn't seem to trouble the General.
But your success only proves security here is adequate. But it'd take dozens of men with heavy equipment to steal the satellite.
Well, yeah, but they could still blow it up, you idiot.
The Pentagon beam counter talks Flag into showing them the satellite and explains what it does.
It can receive and send the most powerful energy to anywhere at any time.
It's a trick, of course, and she plants a tracking chip the mass device can home in on. Unfortunately, Destro is having, performance issues.
Mass device my foot.
Hey, it can happen to any guy, Destro, so don't feel bad.
So, instead of beaming up the satellite, they try to beam down troops to bring it out. Okay, if I were one of those troopers standing there, I'd be pissing my pants right about now. But the thing works this time, and they appear in front of the Joes.
Hey, wait a minute. Play that clip again. That's gunfire. Those are actual gunfire sounds.
Yeah, like I said earlier, at this point they hadn't quite figured out what they could or couldn't do in the cartoon, so they used gunfire sound effects, though they still mostly looked like laser fire. Anyway, this is also when we're introduced to the Baroness, who was disguised as the beam counter. The Joes get chased out and shut out, but get reinforcements and use equipment to just raise the entire wall up. The battle is joined.
And sadly, this is one of the things that the cartoon gets made fun of the most often for.
Nobody shoots anybody else, just equipment and tanks.
And yes, I understand why that is.
But the problem here is they're fighting in an incredibly small space where it's practically impossible not to hit each other. This battle should have been set in a much larger space, or there should have been more cover for both sides to hide behind, because it looks ridiculous like this. Anyway, the tide turns for Cobra, and they are forced to surrender.
It's over, Baroness. You and Major Blood step out.
Or are they?
I'm afraid our surrender has been cancelled.
Yeah, Destro gets the device to work and takes the satellite, but Duke comes along for the ride, trying to grab the Baroness, and why he'd do something so dumb, I have no idea.
Man of action indeed.
So they arrive at the Cobra Temple, where Duke is subdued after a short fight. And note how the Cobra officers have red Cobra logos and rank insignias, unlike the toys.
This would get fixed in later series, but would remain a bit inconsistent throughout.
Yeah, it's an animation error, but a very understandable one considering the trooper and the officer look so similar. Cobra launches the satellite and uses it to direct the mass device's energy so they can transport stuff from all over the world. They demonstrate this by making the Eiffel Tower vanish and demand the world surrenders. Hey, do you think this scene is the reason they picked the Eiffel Tower as the landmark to be destroyed in the Rise of Cobra?
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
First, if they needed the satellite, then how were they able to transport the troops before? And it's not because they had a homing device, since they needed that for the Eiffel Tower too. Second, how did they get this camera angle? Is their agent lying on the ground on his belly? Was he trying to get an upskirt shot of the woman while he was at it? I mean, I wouldn't put anything past a Cobra agent.
Speaking of questions...
Scarlet appears to be in charge now. Why is she in charge? Or, better question, why was Duke in charge before?
Which leads to the real question. Where was Hawk?
You know, the actual leader of the Joes in both the toy line and comic.
Well, there are a couple of reasons as to why Hawk wasn't in this series.
For one thing, the original toys were being phased out at the point this cartoon was made. That's why there's less emphasis on most of those characters, with the exception of Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and maybe Stalker. For another thing, Hasbro really wanted to push Duke as their golden boy, in the cartoon at least.
And you couldn't really have two leaders at once.
Plus, finally, Duke and Hawk were both square-jawed blonde heroes, so they looked pretty similar to each other, and there was the concern this would confuse kids. So Hawk wouldn't be allowed into the cartoon series until he got a new figure, and he damn well better dye his hair so he didn't look like Duke anymore. Anyway, Duke wakes up in Cobra's slave pits, because they have those apparently, where the slaves have weird headbands.
Water! Please!
They are mindless creatures of the Cobra organization.
By the way, the Baroness is wearing the outfit she had in the early comics here, not her more traditional leather dominatrix outfit. That's because Hasbro had decided she'd get a toy, but the design hadn't been finalized yet, so they used the comic look. This also means she's the only character from the 1984 toy line that's in this miniseries. She informs him he'll be forced into gladiatorial combat. Meanwhile, the Joes are visiting Professor Vandermeer, the world's foremost expert on the mass device.
So I guess he's a Trekkie.
They are, however, walking into a trap. And it's so weird to see a bad guy in disguise and not having it be Zartan, since that character hasn't been invented yet. So a short battle breaks out, pew pew, boom boom, Cobra retreat, etc. Though I will note the animation looks really good here, and the hiss tanks look absolutely gorgeous and detailed throughout the episode.
So kudos there.
The Doctor tells them Cobra got the idea of the mass device from him, and he'll help the Joes by building a second one for them. But they'll need those rare materials to power it. Back with Cobra, a slave girl resists the mind control through sheer power of thirst for Duke as he's being led to the arena.
I must find a way to help him.
He's had a headband put on him, and it's revealed they can control him with the freaking joystick. With one button! And they can control all his movements. Okay, I played Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 on an Amiga 1200 computer that also had just one button, and they managed to make that work even though the arcade cabinet had 5 buttons.
But this is a bit much.
Yeah, there's a transporter from Star Trek and a mind control headband, but that joystick is what I'm calling bullcrap on.
I've done this job for too long.
And Duke's opponent will be Conan the Barbarian? A freaking 11 feet tall guy that makes the ground shake when he walks?
Okay, yes, that is a bit much to take in.
But I do have a theory as to why he's this behemoth. He looks like he's straight out of Masters of the Universe. Maybe this was the cartoon's way of saying, hey kids, you can totally play with G.I.Joe and He-Man together.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them.
And the episode ends with Conan about to go medieval on Duke. Yes, of course, it's a cliffhanger. This is a 5-part miniseries, remember? So that was the Cobra Strikes, the very first part of the mass device and the first G.I. Joe cartoon episode ever broadcast.
And it was pretty great.
It set up the main characters and main conflict well, the animation was good, mostly, and we got a nice cliffhanger.
It's also interesting how different it was from later cartoon series.
When they had parachutes, no gunfire sounds, and a higher-pitched Cobra Commander's voice.
Something I haven't mentioned yet, because I couldn't figure out where to talk about it, is Snake Eyes' outfit.
Not counting the Baroness, this was the only cartoon model that was radically different from the toy, being blue and purple instead of just black. This was done because anything that's pitch black really doesn't show up well in animation. We would get a more show-accurate version of the toy in 2003 as part of the Mass Device DVD/figure set. And that's it for my look at Cobra Strikes. It was fun to go back to where it all began. Now, when will I take a look at part 2?
I haven't decided yet. Well, I'll see you next time, everybody. And hey, why not like, share, and subscribe if that's your thing?
We'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Okay, so after watching this scene about a dozen times, it does appear that the pilots do bail out of the jets. Still, at that altitude, they're still dead. Also, I wonder how many people will watch after the credits, and how many people will correct me in the comments.